Stuart from Riku here. Today I want to do something a little bit different. I am in Bubble and I'm going to do a Stable Diffusion generator full run through of how you can set this up yourself. So I've created a Bubble app, I've opened the index page and I've just started to set a few things up. First of all, I went to the page layout and I did column, because columns are great because we can stack one thing on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other. Whereas if we have something like a row, it's going to horizontally stack those things. So we've added a group at the top, which is a row, and we've just added a piece of text saying what the page is all about. And if we wanted to stack other text on top of this, we could just copy this element, and we could paste, and we could paste, and we could paste. And you can see how these sort of then appear on the top. And we have then added a group below this, which is again a column, because we're going to want to stack things vertically within this. And we have set it up so everything is centered in this column. We used the header text, but the header text was left aligned, so we've just tweaked that to be centered here. And if we preview our app, it looks something like this at the moment, which is great. So what do we need to do now to actually get to a point where we can generate using Stable Diffusion? So the next thing we need to do is we need to add some text underneath here. So we could say, okay, this text we want centered. We don't want it fixed. And we're going to choose probably the heading 3 dark, but we're going to make this centered here. And we are going to say, this is a demo of Stable Diffusion. Try it out for yourself by entering a prompt below. And we have that text done nicely. The minimum height of this is 45. You could adapt that to your needs, but I think that's going to be fine for what we want, because we actually want a bit of space here. One of the things that I like to do is see, okay, this is 16 pixels, this text, so I could just make this 16 pixels, and you'll see that the text fits fine. And then we can add a margin on the bottom, say like 30 pixels. And then when we add an input box, which is what we want, that is going to be 30 pixels below. So there's going to be a gap between this and this, and you see that there's not really a gap between the title and like the subheading. So we can do that, and we'll just add like a 10 pixel gap, and then that spaces it nicely there. So we have our input box. We can put this in a center, and we could choose what size we want this input box to be. I will say that we probably want a minimum size 320 pixels and a maximum size of 640 pixels. And then remember, we can just preview and see how things are as they go. That looks fine to me. We'd tidy it up if we were doing it correctly, but for a quick dirty demo, this looks fine to me. And the height is 48. Let's just change that to 40. And we have our input box, and we can just put enter your prompt here. Cool. So what do we need now? We probably need a button. So we have a button. We can center that button. We can add a little space at the top, say 5 pixels. Maybe we'll go 15. And we're just sort of seeing how this looks. And we'll change this so it'll be 320, 640. So we do the same thing. Perfect. And we can change, we can change the style of the button. Let's just change the color to something else. And I'm deliberately doing a really rubbish color design, so please don't slaughter me in the comments about that. And we could hit generate, image. Okay, so now you can see that our little app is starting to take shape. We have a title, we have a box for the input, and we have a generate image. But if we click on this generate image, nothing is going to happen at the moment. So what we need to do is we need to hook that up in the workflows on how that is going to look. But we also want to ensure that the image that is generated is displayed correctly. So what we need to do now is we're going to add a repeating group below here. And we're going to add a margin on the button, and we'll just say we want a 30 pixel margin. We want this repeating group to be centered. We want the columns to be 2. We want the rows to be 1. And we will sort that out in a second. We don't want the fixed number. And we don't want the fixed number. We want this to be 512 for the height, so it can fit the images, which are 512 by 512 if we're just going to keep basic squares. And the minimum width of a column should also be 512. So we've got the height and the width both being 512 by 512, and we can say 512 by 512, and we can make this into a column, because that means we can put an image, and then on top of that image we can put the prompt below it, and I think that will look very cool. We can say the minimum width is 512. We want that to be set, so that's going to be 512 by 512. The minimum height is going to be 512, but then as more images stack below, there will be other images below, and maybe actually we'll make this 520, because that means there's going to be an 8 pixel gap between the first and the second one. There's always going to be an 8 pixel gap, so that's probably worth doing. So we could say 520 as the minimum height, and we probably want to change that just here. So now we're going to get into actually building this out, because if we reload this, you don't see anything of that repeating group because nothing is in it yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new data type, and this is going to be image generation. And we could say, you know, we want to make this private by default, or do we want it public for everyone? If we're building an app, then we want it to be private by default, so every user only has access to the stuff that they've created. I'm just going to make this public for the sake of this demo. And we're going to put in a few fields here. So we're going to put prompt, and this is going to be text. We're going to put ID, which is going to be a number. We're going to put width, which is going to be that's going to be a number. We're going to put height, which is going to be a number, and we're going to put image, which naturally is going to be an image. So we've got height, ID, image, prompt, width, and we probably want status. And this is going to be text. So we're going to be playing around with an API that I've been playing with for a little while, and I will link that down below if you want to check it out for yourself. It's very good value for Stable Diffusion, but it is not the fastest. So if you are hitting generate multiple times, or if you have an app with a lot of people using it, then it might not be suitable at the moment, but I am told that they are speeding it up all the time. So this generation is only going to get better, and they're working on some really cool features. So it's definitely worth checking out. So now we have our image generation set up. We can go back to the design. We can say type of content, image generation. And then we can sort out the data source, but we will do that in a moment. So we have our repeating group. What we want to do is we want to put a group in this repeating group, and this is going to be a fixed group, 512 by 512, and you'll see there is that little 8 pixel gap at the bottom. And for the sake of us building this out, let's just put color on this for now. So we've got this white group, and we will have an image as the background here. And the way that I do that would be to put image, and I would show that below. And one of the other things that I would do, so I just want to put a group on top of this group, and I can move this about because we are using the fixed group. So we want this to be at the bottom of this group, and again we can give this a different color. So we can say, okay, we want this to be black, but we want it to be a little bit transparent. So we can say, okay, that looks good to me. And we could put text in here, and this text could be the parents group. So we need to say image generation for the main group. We need to get the data from the repeating group into these little subgroups. So the way that you do that, you have to feed it through. So the first group that you put in was this white one. So we need to say, okay, what data are we feeding in? We're feeding in the image generation, and we want the current sales image generation. And then again, because this is a different group we have at the bottom, it's image generation. And again, we want the parent group's image generation. So every single layer of groups you need to feed through the data so that it will be able to work. And for this text, we can make it dynamic. So we want the parent group's image generation, and we want the prompt. And we can make this sort of as big as we want. We can say center horizontally. Let's just make it a little bit bigger. Again, center horizontally, center vertically. Looks good to me. There should be enough lines for 2 lines of this text. And now we have all of that set up. What I want to do is I'll just change this. We have background style. We want the image, dynamic image, and it's be current sales image. So this should now all be ready to go. We've only got to hook up the API, and then we have to build out the process. So the way that we do that, we go to plugins, we go to add plugin, we make sure we have the API connector plugin. API connector plugin is awesome because it lets you connect all of the APIs by the name. So then we can say, okay, Stable Diffusion, testing, and we can go to our cool, and then we can say test cool. And we want to use this as an action, so we can use it in a workflow. Data is when you're loading stuff directly on the page. We want action here. So we're going to click action, and we need to make a post request. So we can come in, we can then look at the documentation from this page here. We go view documentation, and we can copy what we need. So we need to send a post request to this endpoint So we can come back into Bubble and we can put that here. And we can see, do we need any headers? We don't need any headers, but everything is in the body. So body is form data. So that's super easy to set up. We go body, we go form data, and then we add the parameters that we need. So we need the prompt, we need the width, we need the height. So we could put prompt, width, height, and then we can have the number of inference steps. So num inference steps, and just copy this. The guidance scale, and we want the seed, we will leave blank so it randomizes, but we need to include it. And we also want this webhook value, and I'll tell you why that is important in a moment. So we got the webhook there, and then we can start feeding this in. So we could say the cat sat on the mat, and we could say, okay, we want 512 by 512. Number of inference steps, 50 is pretty standard. Guidance scale, 7.5 or 8.5 is pretty standard. Again, if you wanted to toggle all these settings on the front end, you'd be able to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make all of this stuff not private. Oh, and I need to put a key in here as well. So the key is important. I have a test one. This will be deleted. So don't try and copy it because it won't work. And I would put this as private, because if I put it as private, nobody can see it. If I don't put it as private, it might appear within inspect element on the page, and that's not good. So there is some little things of security here. Seed is empty, that's fine for us. And the webhook, what we want to do is we want to load up another page of Bubble, and I'll show you why in a minute. I'm just going to pause this so you can't see everything in my Bubble account, and I'll come back to it. Okay, so I've loaded up the second version of this. We have what we're doing here, and we have the webhook here. And what I want to do is I want to do the back-end workflow. To do the back-end workflows, you need to come into settings first of all. You need to hit API, and you need to hit enable workflow API and back-end workflows. We've done that. So then we want to also enable the image generation data API, because we're going to be changing this now. So we come into backend workflows, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a new API workflow, and this is going to be Stable Diffusion catch. And we can say we want to ignore the privacy rules. We can expose it as public. That's fine for what we're doing here. Detect request data. So the request data, we need to send something here for it to actually know what we want to do. So we can copy this, and this is why I wanted to put this in here. And again, we want this to be private so people can't see it if they look in the inspect element. And just to make sure that this works how I want it to work, I'm just going to duplicate and just send 3 requests, because sometimes this works great and the requests go through straight away, and sometimes it adds them to a queue. So if it adds them to a queue, you're going to get a different output than you'd expect. So for example, if I am getting something like, well, let's just do one. Let's hit initialize. Cool. The parameter seed cannot be empty. And then we go allow blank. That's something that we messed up there. We can then hit initialize cool. Parameter seed cannot be empty. I think it can be empty. Let's just put something in here for now. We put optional. Okay, so we needed to put optional in there to make it work with no value. Now this is sending the data to the API, and the API is going to come back with the information for us. So you'll see it says connecting and it's initialized. So we've got status, we've got an ID, and we've got an output. So this is awesome, but it's not always going to work like that because we have our output and our generated image, which is perfect. But say I send a few requests on Postman, so I'll do that now. We go 1, we go 2, we go 3. So I've sent 3 requests. If I initialize this again, I'm expecting it to add the request to a queue. Although that doesn't seem to be happening today. So let's just do this without the backend workflow then. And we will just sort of continue thinking on our feet. So let's just say we don't need the backend workflow. We can scrap all of that because we are getting the requests through fairly quickly. So let's just delete this and we can go back here. We've got the data we need from the API. So what we can do is we come back here and we say generate image, and we want to do a few things. So what are we doing? When we hit this button, we want to make sure there's a value in here, and we then will push the data to create a new data in our system of image generation. So we will come in when button generate image is clicked, and we say only do this when the input field value is not empty. We want to create a new thing, and that thing is going to be the image generation, and we want to add the prompt of the image generation as this value of the input field. And we can also add the height, we can add the width. Because we are just doing 512 by 512, if we wanted to, we could add some additional fields here to give the user the choice of the image generation that they can do, but we're not doing that in this demonstration. So we've created our new thing now. So we've created the image generation, and now we want to use that Stable Diffusion testing call, which can be found by typing it, or you can come in and you can go to I always find it by typing, so let's just continue. I guess it's under plugin, right? It must be under plugin. Yeah, Stable Diffusion testing, test call. And then we have this box where we can put in those details, right? So we can then say the input value is the prompt. The width and the height is 512, so we don't want to change that. We don't want to change all of this. But if we were creating more input fields where we could map the data, then we can do that fine. And one of the other things that I think we should probably do here is we just want to put an alert on this page. So we have this alert, and we can say we want this alert to be, centered. We want a standard alert. Position the alert at the top. And let's just make a different color because our background is already white, the nav bar at the top. So we've added an alert now, and we can just hide this again so it goes away. And what we're going to do is we're going to insert an action before, and we're going to say show message in an alert box, and we can put thank you, your image is now generating. And we could set that up to be 3000, and we could say this process may take a few moments, so please be patient. And the person will see that once they hit generate. And the final thing that we want to do is we want to now edit this image generation that we did earlier. So we do make changes to thing to change, result of step 1. And now we would have an ID because we've got that from this API call. So we'd say, okay, result of step 3, we have an ID. We'll put that in. We should have a status as well, so we can put that in. And we also have the image. So we could say image is step 3's output. And we can then we probably wanted to change that to a file. But let's just see if we can do that in a second, because we might want to make changes to a thing again, just sort of the way that the bubble is working, to then say image equals this image generation's image saved to S3. And then we can give it a file name where we can calculate the formula, and we can generate a random string, and we can say, okay, we want a 12 character string using letters and numbers, and we want to then just put .png at the end. And the final step would be reset the relevant inputs. So that means once all of this process is run, the input field for the prompt will reset if we want that to happen. If we don't want that to happen, then we don't put reset relevant inputs. So now we have a generate button that should do something. So if we go back to our app, you'll notice if I hover over this, you'll see it now gives a click like it would work. And because it is empty, what I can do is I can do a very quick thing where I say an element is clicked and we do button generate. And when this value is empty, we can just show an alert, right? And we can say you can't generate without a prompt. Please provide one. So then we come back in. If I try and hit generate without filling in a value here, we get that message. And we get the message. And if we want to provide a prompt, so we can say husky puppy sipping on milk. This will then trigger the workflow. But we have no way to show it at the moment because we have the repeating group, but we're not showing it in the way that is going to work. So what we need to do, we need to click back in this repeating group. And because we got groups on top of it, it can be hard to click. I can see down here there was a little space, but you can also come in the sidebar here where you have all of your structure of your page and you can sort of see everything. So we've got a group inside this repeating group, and then we've got another group, and then we got some text. So it's super easy to sort of see everything. And the data source here is going to be, do a search for image generation, and these are going to be created by equals the current user, and then we want to sort this by created date, and we want to say yes. So that means that the latest one is always going to appear on top, and then it's going to go the next one and the next one and the next one. I hope it's that way anyway, otherwise I'm going to look pretty foolish in a second. So now if I put in husky puppy sipping milk, I can hit this generate button, and you'll see it's created this image generation. But we're still waiting for the API request to come, and you can see this at the top where it's loading, it's loading, it's loading, it's loading. We have the text here, but it sucked because we haven't got the right colors. So we should probably make this text white, and we should look at providing a loading animation or something here. So the way that we do that is we could come in, let's fix this text and make this white. We have this background with the dynamic image, and we can say when current cells image is empty, the data source is, no, we don't want the data source, we want the background image, and we want something to display like a loading animation. So I could come to something like Lottie files, and I could say loading, and we could just pick one. Let's just pick the first one. And we could download this, and let's just download the GIF because that's nice and easy. We need an account. Let me just do this. Okay, so I made an account and I've just downloaded this loader. And what I want to do is I actually don't want to do this, because if I try and do this, because the image is so big, if I try and put this loader in, it's going to blow up that image to a silly size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another group to go in here, and this is going to be center, and we are going to make this a row group, which is going to be centered, and we are going to put the background of this group as this loading GIF that we just created. So I've just uploaded that loading GIF, and we can change the size of it, right? So we could say 100 by 100, or even let's try 50-50. Yeah, and I'm doing this very raw and ready. On Lottie, you can change things like the background color and actually modify a lot of the different settings before you download, but for the sake of this demonstration, I just want it to be quick. So we now have this group E, and remember, we've got to send the data through whenever we add a group in a repeating group. So we need to do that. Image generation, parents group, image generation, so that the data comes here. And then the reason we want to do that is so we can say when parents group's image generation image is empty, this element is visible, tick. And when what we want to do is we want to then get rid of this. Element is visible on page load. No, we don't want it visible on page load. But when it's empty, we do want it to be visible. So now we can come back to our app and we can see we have our image from before. And if we use the same prompt, we're going to get a different image because we didn't set a seed value. And we should also see the loader, and we have the fixed text, and we've just got to wait for it to complete. So we just built something with Stable Diffusion in Bubble in about 30 minutes. Super easy and super quick. And if you just wanted to continue to span this, you see that I have that reset. So for using the same prompt multiple times, it's not great. But if I was to come into something like Lexica and actually find some prompts that I could use, let's say we want to use this one, and we can then come back into our app and we can hit generate on that. We can then see it working, and we've just got to wait, and we've got our image, and we can generate another one, and we can keep going. So by using an API like this, you can create your own version of Stable Diffusion to wrap in your own way, and you could put like a password protect screen on to stop other people from using this. And this is a very basic sort of demonstration. We have the 8 pixel gap between the repeating group. We have the images. I could put some roundness on these to maybe make them look a bit nicer. Let's just see how that would actually look. So if we were to say we want 10 pixels of roundness, and we see, okay, yeah, that gives it a nice little curvy corner. It hasn't done it on the bottom group, so you'd have to also do that where we have the text. But the top looks super nice now. And one of the other things that I think I should just talk about quickly is if I go into inspect element and I go into network, and if I want to see the request, just to see security, I can see that this star has been created. And you can see all of the stuff that has happened here. And you can see the return values. You can see the API output. And so on and so on. So some of the issues that you can have when building with Bubble is a lot of things are available on the front end which you might not want to be available on the front end, and that's something that you can fix with backend workflows or by having a better security on what you're doing. So you can see we have the image, we have everything available here. It's more advanced topic, something that you don't really need to worry about at this time if you're just getting started. And if it's something that you're creating just for your own personal use, then as long as you sort of password protect the page, then you're not going to have any issues. It's more so if you're creating a consumer app for a lot of people, then you may want to consider how you do your requests and what information you are showing on the front end compared to the back end. You know, another way that you could do this is, and a way that we've sort of implemented it across some of the projects that we do, is when somebody hits the generate button, we create a new thing in the database, and then we run a backend workflow from that created thing in the database to then do the API request, and that all runs in the back end of the app, so the user isn't kept waiting like they are here. If I hit generate, we're now loading. I can't do anything else until this finishes loading. Whereas if I was to create something with backend workflow, I can hit generate, I can hit generate, I can hit generate, I can hit generate. it all sends to the backend, and you are fine to have fun. But I hope this is sort of a useful introduction to Bubble, how Bubble works, and how you can build some awesome stuff with Bubble, and how simple it is to do. And if you want to sort of replicate what I've done here, I'll provide a link to the API that I used on this occasion, and you can have a go at implementing it yourself. You should be able to build something like this within about an hour if you don't know what you're doing and you're running it completely from scratch. I could do it a bit quicker because I have a bit more knowledge on that, but obviously there are things that I'd tidy up, like, this loading with the white background looks amateur. This text I don't really like. The color scheme on this I'd take a bit more time. The hover color here. There's a ton of things. I could add like a download button here. But this is a nice introduction, and I thought it would be useful to make this video. So this is a quick, dirty way to integrate Stable Diffusion into Bubble. I hope that it's helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to help and answer those questions, and if you've got value from this video and are looking at integrating AI into your projects and your work, then consider signing up for Riku today. We have all of the best text and image technology in a single place, and we'd love to help you get to a stage where you are comfortable building and deploying it, and that makes us super happy. Thank you.